Now, the first commercial passenger flight between the US and Cuba in more than 50 years is set to take off on Wednesday. The JetBlue service will depart from Fort Lauderdale and land in the city of Santa Clara. It marks another milestone in the normalization of ties between the two countries. Steve Mort reports from Florida.
Until now, the only way to fly from the US to Cuba has been by charter airline, and service has been restricted to a small number of US cities, but all that is about to change.
It's incredibly historic. The exchange of ideas that is inherent with people traveling is very important for this process of normalization.
JetBlue becomes the first US airline to fly commercially to Cuba in more than 5 decades. American airlines will follow suit in a few days' time.
While direct services from Florida to Cuba begin this week, it'll be some months before services from other cities to the island begin, including from Tampa and right here in Orlando.
Okay, so we're just going to do out of Havana.
But travel agents and charter flight operators who've long dominated the US-Cuba travel market are skeptical. They say their organized tours allow Americans to fall into a mandatory US-approved category of travel, such as people-to-people exchanges.
You still have to follow the rules. Tourism is not open, so you can just go because I want to know Cuba. You have to fit in one of the categories. Otherwise, you can go.
Nevertheless, charter operators are braced for cut-price competition, especially if the US Congress lifts the decades-old embargo.
I'd like Congress to act, and I'd like for folks on both sides of the aisle to really come together and lift the travel ban and then ultimately lift the trade embargo.
The US government will allow 110 daily flights to Cuba, and several US airlines have been given tentative permission to fly to the island. Steve Mort, TRT World, Orlando, Florida.
Well, Jason Sinclair is with the International Air Transport Association, also known as IATA, and he joins me now from Miami, appropriately enough. Jason, thanks for joining us on Money Talks. Look, a lot of US airlines are rushing for this market. Do you think they're going to make money out of this in the long run?
It's good to be here. You know, the airlines are very interested in the market in Cuba. Today's a very big day for aviation, both in the United States and in Cuba. Certainly, you know, we've seen that there's an increase in tourism to Cuba. There's many more visitors this year than there were in the past, 3.5 million visitors. So the airlines see Cuba as an undeveloped and attractive market. We think that increased air ties between the two countries will be very positive for the Cuban people and the Cuban economy.
But do you think initially they're going to have to make a loss because there's so many of them competing, and perhaps, you know, this isn't the most mature of routes?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to recognize that, you know, today is the first flight of scheduled air service, but there have been many flights to Cuba and the United States before that from air charters. So there are many people that are already traveling to Cuba. There'll be many more, obviously, once there's scheduled air service to the country. You know, if you look at Cuba's population, for example, it's fairly underdeveloped. I mean, there are 11 million people there, and very few flights are bought actually in the country. So we think there'll also be an increase as average incomes rise in Cuba for greater demand for air travel.
But of course, US citizens are formally banned from traveling to Cuba as tourists. Do you think this is still a serious prohibition, or do you think it's something that can really quite easily be got around in reality?
Right. Well, it's not really for me to say, but I mean, right now there are 12 exceptions for U.S. citizens to be able to travel to Cuba, and many people are traveling under those exceptions. And certainly it will be easier to travel to Cuba for people from the United States with scheduled air service now beginning today.
Right, I didn't know this, but checking out your website, found out that IATA was actually founded in Cuba in 1945. And, you know, about a year ago, your CEO said he really wanted to promote travel to Cuba as part of that relationship, really. How do you plan to do that?
That's correct. We were founded in Havana in 1945 in the National Hotel. What we've done is Cubana Aviación has been a member of IATA for many years, and we've worked with them. And we've also been working with authorities in Cuba as they prepare to have many more flights to the country. So we've worked with airports of Havana and Baradero to ensure that they have the right slot management to avoid saturation. We've also provided courses to Cubana and also to the authorities that work with the airport in the country.
Okay, Jason Sinclair from IATA, thank you very much for joining us on Money Talks.